Hello and welcome to the big picture. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is about to end his 10-day-long tour abroad, one of the longest undertaken by a Prime Minister in recent memory. These 10 days have been packed with important meetings, including the East Asia Summit, ASEAN-India Summit, G20 leaders meet, BRICS leaders meeting, apart from a series of bilateral meetings in Myanmar and Australia. His now familiar outreach to Indians in these countries, especially in Australia, had the same echo like the one in New York. He has also managed to create a buzz about India as well as himself, even amid the gathering of world's most powerful leaders. So behind all these obviously impressive meetings and atmospherics, what is it that the Prime Minister has been able to achieve? What is it that India can look forward to from this visit and meetings? What will be the short-term as well as long-term impact? We will discuss all this today with M.K. Bhadrakumar, former ambassador and a leading foreign policy analyst, Professor Baladas Ghoshal, Senior Fellow, Center for Policy Research, Dilip Cherian, founder, Perfect Relations, and Dr. Didar Singh, Secretary General, FICCI. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Bhadrakumar.
Good evening.
If you look at these last 9 days that he has been out of this country, in Myanmar, Australia, what is that one thing which strikes you has been his most significant achievement?
I think it is a fortuitous circumstance that there has been a coming together of so many major international regional events.
Which doesn't happen normally.
It doesn't happen normally. Now, this is very timely because it is happening right at the outset of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tenure as Prime Minister. You see, the fact of the matter is that when Narasimha Rao...
So he has had this opportunity to meet a whole wide variety of leaders.
No, it's more fundamental than that. That's what I was coming to. When Prime Minister Narasimha Rao conceived the Look East policy, there was a certain world situation. And there were certain imperatives for India at that time as a non-aligned country coming out of the bipolar world which disintegrated. And also with the economic reform program just being launched at that time in the early 1990s. But then the fact of the matter is that, over time, this Look East policy got heavily laden with geopolitics.
Right.
Frankly, in terms of India being a counterweight to China and all sorts of notions, and this reached a peak, in fact, during the time of the George Bush administration, when the neocon ideology was permeating everything, and Indian think tankers got profoundly influenced.
Right.
But the point is, this region has not been standing still. It's in a stage of great transformation itself. And now, I think for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, with his action-oriented mindset and his determination to go ahead with the development agenda, there is a very good opportunity that he has got, in my opinion, that's the most important salient of this regional tour, to restructure India's Look East policy. See, Hillary Clinton told us, call it Act East.
Act East.
So we started calling it Act East. But the point is the content is still lacking. And that is where I think the Prime Minister would have applied himself in my reckoning, in my expectation. The point is, this region is in a state of transformation in a major way. There are all kinds of regional economic integration process, the primacy of the development agenda, especially in important countries like Indonesia, the ASEAN's relationship with China. All this is taking place, plus the United States' inability to sustain that level of influence that it had in the region historically due to its decline and its preoccupations partly in the Middle East and its domestic preoccupations in terms of the recovery of the American economy. All this taken together, there are very many things which are at work in the area. Now, Australia, for example, I could discuss this. You look at the state of play there. In Australia, Australia's trade relationship with China, bilateral trade is to the volume exceeding $150 billion.
Right.
China accounts for more than 1/3 of Australia's all exports and services, goods and services. India's exports to Australia is just $3 billion. So there is a lot of things to be done there. Now, two major, in the APEC summit in Beijing, where India was unfortunately not there, two major regional projects have got underway. They have been underway, they have been in the pipeline, but they are competing for primacy. One is the Trans-Pacific
No,
Partnership.
we will come to that. But the issue is about what happened during these 10 days. We are now joined in by Manoj Joshi, senior journalist and a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Welcome, Manoj. Manoj, my question to you is the same which I was asking Bhadrakumar also. If you look back at these last 9 days of the Prime Minister's visit abroad in Myanmar and Australia, what is that one thing which you think he has achieved which will have some lasting benefit for the country?
Well, I think the most important thing from my point of view is that at least our lead batsman has gone out to bat. I think this is the beginning of that process because, and I deliberately say beginning, because, we are far behind everyone else. We are, our own economy needs to get into a high sustainable, high growth path. And then only can we really engage with this region in a very substantive way. So what has happened is that our batsman has gone out there, and I think he's a showman. And I think what he has done is that he has signaled to the people with his energy and and in his, if you noticed in his speech yesterday in Australia, he very categorically and clearly laid out the achievements of his very short tenure so far. He spoke, for example, about the Jan Dhan Yojana. Then he spoke about the decisions he had taken on FDI. Then he spoke, so the point that he made was that I am here, I've started taking decisions, watch this space. And I think this is an extremely important signal to the region because everyone was somewhat despondent. It's not that they want India to play off India against China, but they want an important counterweight which will help them to negotiate their situation with China in a better fashion, in a more productive fashion. Otherwise, what happens is that China will simply come on too heavy. And I think Ambassador just pointed out, the extent of the Australian trade exports to China. Now, that's actually an imbalance, meaning I think too much of it is going to China. Some of it, a lot of it should come our way as well. And I think if we balance this out, it will be to the mutual benefit of all the countries of the region.
Okay. Dr. Didar Singh, how would you look at this, especially the one on trade, what happened in Myanmar, in the Indo-US deal, which is expected to lead to the FTA being signed at the WTO. Do you think that this is something which should be looked at more closely?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with what Manoj said and what Ambassador said. When you look at this entire look east kind of policy that we are talking about.
Yeah, please continue.
Remember, we are not the only people looking east. There are a large number of, if you look at it at a geopolitical as well as a geo-economic situation.
Please continue, sir.
The east is where the agenda is today.
I think,
and therefore,
no, is there? I think there is a problem.
Out in places.
Dr. Didar Singh, I think we'll settle. I think there's an echo there, and we'll settle that problem. I'll come back to you, Professor Ghoshal.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
One particular thing, if you have to lay your finger on, which you think that this is something which will have a long-term repercussions. And
I think, in my opinion, in regard to the look east policy, what Modi has done this time, the one sort of kind of achievement, is that he has been able to give at least an assurance that he will be able to, at least he will try to breach the gap between the expectations from the ASEAN countries and what India has been doing all these years. I think there has been a lot of expectation from the countries of Southeast Asia for India to play a much more important role, not only in terms of security structure in the region, but also in terms of economic engagement. Now, on both those counts, India was very hesitant. In terms of even regional economic integration and economic sort of agreements that were signed in the past, there were a lot of hesitations, and even those that were passed, that trade agreement with ASEAN, that was passed almost after 7 years of haggling and all that kind of thing. So I think for the first time, I think Modi has given a kind of an indication that he would be a little bit more serious about, paying much greater attention. And there is now one more important thing that has come out in terms of our relationship with Myanmar. You know, for the first time, the Myanmaris, at least the president, had expressed the relations in terms of brotherly relations. You know, in the case of China, they used to refer to as relations like cousins. Now, this itself is a great improvement in terms of, you know, how Myanmar looks towards India. Now, I think it is up to Modi and also to the Indian establishment to at least implement what India has been promised all these years. In fact, his entire lookist policy is a lot of assurances. But in terms of actual sort of implementation, I think it's much to be desired. Now, until and unless that is sort of, you know, that gap is reduced, I think there will always be a kind of a skepticism in the minds of many of these countries of the region about India's ability to deliver things. And India will not be in the antenna of many of these countries, even though they have been talking about Modi and all the halo that he has been creating about. But much will depend on how things are implemented and to what extent what Modi has been talking about linking development and foreign policy, how he is able to give a shape to it. He has not been able to do anything so far, only has given a vision, an idea about it.
Okay, Dilip, you know, the kind of atmospherics he's been able to create everywhere, wherever he has gone abroad, you think he's redefining India in the eyes of the foreigners? By doing what do you think is his intention when he goes and does these kind of things?
Manoj used the word of our batsmen going out to bat. But I think this is a Prime Minister who is acting like a CEO on a roadshow. He's on a roadshow.
He's on a constant roadshow.
He's on a constant roadshow selling India. And the audiences he's selling to are three: world leaders, bilateral, managers of bilateral engagement, and the NRI audience back there. And he recognizes the use of each of these three. It depends on what's going to happen domestically, how useful any of this is going to be. Here is a man who's done a bunch of roadshows now, and he's got to come back, present his budget in February 2015, and then wait for the investments to flow. Because unless he's able to show, real hard progress in terms of economic development, and by development here he means actually GDP growth, unless he's able to do that, there isn't so much more to react because,
but let us not look at what will happen in future, but this, what we witness on television screens, the kind of atmospherics which are created, one of the things which is striking is, there have been any number of prime ministers who have gone abroad, Indian prime ministers have gone abroad. Why is it that, you have this kind of atmosphere, this kind of excitement among the NRIs, especially about an Indian prime minister? Is it something which is spontaneous?
There is spontaneity and there is genuine affection for the fact that somebody is reaching out to the common NRI Indian. Don't forget that Indian prime ministers in the past have done these high level, black tie kind of official functions and have reached a certain kind of Indian who lives in these countries. But actually, politicians in these countries recognize when there is a man who connects with large numbers of people. Filling up a stadium with more people than Mick Jagger is serious stuff in Australia. Filling up Madison Square Gardens in the manner that he did, he has become a kind of global rock star. And that's the new idiom. Many of today's leaders, with the exception of a few, Obama and Cameron perhaps, are not yet able to get themselves onto the stage where they can actually connect with tomorrow's audiences, the youth audience. And this is where Narendra Modi is masterly. I've already said this before, but he is probably the greatest event manager this country has ever seen.
Manoj, is it because, I'll come to you also on this question, Mr. Bhadrakumar. Manoj, you have been traveling, you've been with prime ministers, you've gone abroad. Is it the fact that the NRIs and OCIs, were they feeling neglected by the Indian government, the Indian prime ministers when they used to visit these countries, and now suddenly they find themselves at the center of attention? Is that what it is all about?
Well, in part, certainly it's that. The thing is that if you look at our NRI community in the United States, basically it got going in the 60s. And then you had a long period because, in the United States, for an average job, you get about 12 days leave. And so travel was difficult. Now you're in the jet era. Many of these people have done well and they have prospered and they are second generation people established. Australia, the Indian community is even younger, meaning they started really going about 10 years ago. Now, the way I see it is something else, meaning one is, of course, yes, they feel, they get attention, they feel wanted, but the NRI is a peculiar character. You know, the NRI, the Indian NRI loves politics. You know, he is very much into politics. If he's not directly in politics, he likes to fund politics. If you look at the number of people who are contesting, completely out of proportion for, you won't find Chinese Americans contesting, and there are many more Chinese Americans. You won't find Iranian Americans. You know, there are three times more Iranian Americans than there are Indian Americans. But the Indian American likes politics, loves politics. He wants to intervene. You know, he's constantly has that kind of a feeling. But the way I see it is that Modi has done something very smart. He's actually using them. It's not, you see, the NRI is no great investor in India. Exactly. He's not an entrepreneur. He's not going to invest in India. Yes, he may be a source of remittances, but that poor guy is in the Gulf. You know, the remittance guy, he's in the Gulf. He's not in America or in Australia. What Modi has done is, by landing up in Madison Square Garden, then going to Washington, basically, he gave a signal to Obama. Meaning, it is Obama and the American administration who suddenly, when they saw this whole Madison Square Garden thing, they suddenly realized that here is a different kind of an Indian leader. And I think they had to take note of that. So he repeated that performance in Australia, that by going there, I think what he showed local politicians is that, you have this community here. This community is a very political community. And look, I have a measure of this community. This community can support you. And, American presidents, they get a lot of funding from the Indian Americans, right. American politicians. Right. So I think don't forget that aspect of this.
Okay. Bhadrakumar, how do you look at this? And, what is going to yield out of all this excitement?
It's a very, very, very pertinent question. Because I think at the end of the day, we tend to exaggerate the significance of it. This is honestly my opinion. It is warranted. It is quite understandable, and it is in consonance with the political personality of Mr. Narendra Modi. There's no quarrel about it. But it's easy for us to exaggerate its significance for India's foreign policy needs at this time, particularly in structuring a foreign policy orientation, as Professor mentioned earlier, which is as an extension of the development agenda, as to provide the underpinning for the development agenda. I don't know to what extent this is important, and if you actually look at the speech yesterday of the Prime Minister in Sydney, it was completely about India only.
It's about India.
And at that same time, it was
there he was trying to connect with the audience.
But actually, Girish, if you had looked at the Australian media, it was saturated with the coverage of President Xi Jinping's visit at the same time. It overshadowed our Prime Minister's visit. Because what is Australia? Australia is a country which is very clear-headed, that all politics is finally about creating wealth. And and it's very serious about it. So in that kind of a country, to some extent, yoga, cricket, hockey, Mahatma Gandhi, Vivekananda, all this you can talk about, a festival of India and all that, it creates a feel-good. But at the end of the day, how do you garner it? Because, as I said in the beginning, there is a phenomenal shift which is taking place in the Asia-Pacific region, and it is all centered around the economic drama.
Right.
All the countries are aspirational today. It's a high-growth area, and you're talking about big money. Chinese have put, for instance, on the Silk Road itself, $40 billion. And you have the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank.
Right.
You have 2 regional free trade agreement processes underway, projects. So everyone is talking big, In fact, it's very interesting. A similar personality like Mr. Modi, at a similar point of time, has come up in Australia. Come up in Indonesia, Jokowi.
Right.
Now, Jokowi's remarks as he headed back to Jakarta, I was reading it with much interest in the Indonesian press today. He said that, the time for grandstanding is over. He was referring to his predecessor.
Okay.
And he said, at the end of it, I would like to draw the thing and say, how does it benefit my country? And I'm going to develop a relationship. He was talking about Indonesia coming back to a fruitful relationship with China. So now, you see, this is the main theme in the region. And unless we are in sync with that theme, we'll get left behind.
No, but Professor Ghoshal, you think Prime Minister Modi seems to be in sync with the theme, because everywhere he's talking of the right. I mean, if you look at the analyst, if you read what he's saying, he is saying the right things.
He's saying the right things, all right. But the thing is that the point that Mr. Bhadrakumar had raised about the propitious moment, you know, any other Prime Minister, to my mind, at this juncture, would have received quite a lot of attention. The fact that Manmohan Singh could not have made that kind of an impact, maybe because of his own personality. But I think the timing and the kind of developments that are taking place in the region, I think that automatically brings certain attention towards countries like India,
right,
Indonesia, and in many respects, again, Mr. Bhadrakumar had mentioned about Jokowi. I think in many respects, the two countries, the two democracies, you know, interestingly had a lot of similarities in terms of their approaches, the way the elections took place, and the kind of outsiders that were brought into the political process. And both the leaders have been, you know, emphasizing the relationship between development and foreign policy, the domestic sort of emphasis and all that. So I think these are the things that need to be really observed, rather than talking in terms of, you know, in a visionary kind of a language. I think some of this nitty-gritty stuff need to be picked up by our foreign policy makers and then integrate it into our making. You know, for example, Indonesia, for the first time, you know, has made an interesting observation about its future role. Earlier, its defense doctrine never talked about Indian Ocean. It was more Pacific, ASEAN, Australia, United States. Now, for the first time, Jokowi has articulated a policy of bridging the two oceans between Pacific and Indian Ocean.
So what is it? What is the message to India?
And I think India has to take note of all that and has to engage, you know, countries like Indonesia much more effectively.
Okay, Dilip, you know, I'm sure the Prime Minister, his advisors, his brand managers or whatever, are aware of all these things which are happening. You know, it's by doing this, I'm sure they're all aware that, you know, you're creating these huge expectations, because you'll have to start delivering, you'll have to start showing very soon. So you think that, you know, this is something which is, you think there's a short-term agenda of his that, you know, to create this kind of excitement wherever he goes and then get down to work.
Like in any road show, the idea of a road show is to attract investment.
Right.
And I think that's his game plan. He needs to show that there is a flow of money interest. And money interest means manufacturing. Of course, on the reverse side, don't forget that Mr. Adani has gone and invested $7 billion in Australia. So
16.5.
Yeah, okay. When it's finished. Yeah, absolutely. So the fact...
With a $1 billion loan from State Bank of India.
But the fact is that this is a Prime Minister who is out there to get attention and thereby money and thereby investment and thereby jobs. He sees this as a straight line thing. It's not, I'm not sure whether he's thinking short term, but for the moment, he's thinking in terms of immediate term returns. This is what he's looking for.
What is the immediate returns which he can
The immediate return he's expecting is an increased flow of investment from these countries in terms of business.
So it has nothing to do with his own image, the building up his own image and things like that?
I think the image building up, you know, it would be unfair to say is entirely personality driven. It is, he's taking advantage of it, but he knows that, for example, our pretty tenuous relationship with China, he knows that he needs to open up this ASEAN and, you know, East Asian front to make sure that people there recognize that there is a change, a shift in gears in India.
A different leader here. Manoj, you know, when he was there with the G20 leaders, and he was talking of black money, you know, bring back, and apparently the G20 leaders responded to it, and there is some kind of a, you know, commonality in approach on this issue. You think this is something which he has been able to, this is some gain as far as this visit is concerned?
Well, definitely. You see, if you look at the G20 outcome, you see, we call it black money, but, you know, this is much more widely known as tax avoidance.
Right.
And many countries are concerned about this issue of tax avoidance, because in this era of globalization, you have companies, you have Apple paying virtually no tax in the US, they pay it in Ireland, which has very low taxation. So, other countries are also concerned about this. In our system, we call it black money, though we all know that a lot of black money is in India itself, but we are really looking at creating a more transparent and more equitable tax structure around the world, which would benefit us. That is one issue. The second issue was reforming banking, and reforming banking to the point that you don't enter into another crisis.
Right.
Already we are hearing world leaders talking of a possible second crisis. You see? And if we set, and the G20 was a platform where you're really setting the rules for the globalization process, so that there is a win-win situation for all the countries involved, for all the G20 involved. That is why this G20 came up after the 2008 crisis. And I think Mr. Modi did put our best foot forward there.
Okay. Bhadrakumar? As far as G20 is concerned.
Yeah, as far as G20 is concerned, we must understand that G20 was a concerted, very well thought out Western effort to shore up the Bretton Woods system in the aftermath of the financial crisis. There is a challenge coming up from the emerging powers. But now you see the situation has changed. United States' growth rate has picked up 3%. Europe already is certainly in some trouble. But United States is not, so in other words, there's no real challenge now to the Bretton Woods system that way. So if you see the G22, for example, you had a very bizarre situation there where all this agenda that we would like to discuss became a sideshow.
Right.
And it just was taken over by Ukraine. And the spirit of the new Cold War.
And then Russian president had to leave before he was supposed to.
Actually leave, yeah. Now the point is, G20's future there is a question mark. Now the good thing is that it is going into the hands of China, an emerging power. Now what orientation China is prepared to give, in terms of this, in terms of getting a bigger piece of the pie, for emerging powers and, India included, remains to be seen. So G20 is caught in a kind of a twilight zone.
But do you think that Narendra Modi has made an impact at
You see, this money laundering business was in the agenda. Now, in no international conference, when the leaders come there, more than photo op, any negotiations take place.
Okay. What about the BRICS leaders meet, Because parallelly that also happened, and was it intended to to give some signal to the G20 leadership, this BRICS leaders meet?
I don't think that it had much of an impact there, because I think these are issues which again had a focus in the domestic politics to a large extent. And in fact, I'll go back a little bit with, yes, Modi has been able to create an image of a person who will deliver things. That image is more or less accepted now. But I think much will depend on how he's able to bring about, changes within the country. Reform, plus, again, the big thing, as again Mr. Bhadrakumar has mentioned, that the economic integration and the economic play that is going on within the region, to what extent India will be able to, contribute to that process of regional integration, and to what extent India will be able to, integrate itself with the economy of that region.
Okay, Dilip,
that itself will be a big
Dilip, very
test.
quickly, you think these visits to different places, meeting so many leaders, has enhanced the stature of Narendra Modi internationally?
It definitely has enhanced both. Don't forget, he came in on a back foot.
Right.
And now it's a Modi already in the first 6 months who is on a front foot. He's probably on first name basis with all the major world leaders. He's at a place where his image, having been taken stratospheric in terms of where he was, has also pulled India's image to a certain extent.
Manoj, very quickly, same question.
Well, as I said, that the batsman's gone out to play, and the batsman, as I say, he's our star batsman. And I think it's very clear that he has signaled a new era. I think that kind of a signal has gone across the world. Now I think the real issues are at home, because investment is not going to come in just because you've gone and said that our shop is open. Investment will come in when you do substantive things back home.
Okay.
All those companies know that, and they're looking out for that.
Okay, I think on that note, we need to end. it's a job well done as far as his visit is concerned, the kind of image he has built up and all. But now he needs to get down to do the job and convince all those leaders and the people around the world that what he has promised he'll be able to deliver, which is something which we'll all need to wait and watch. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Bhadrakumar, Baladas, Ghoshal, Dilip, Cherian and Manoj, Joshi and Dr. Didar Singh, whose connection we lost earlier. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, the big picture, same time tomorrow.